Welcome to AVL's Reimagine Mobility podcast. This episode is the Q&A session from CES 2023, moderated by Stephan Tarnutzer, President Mobility Technologies Incorporated of AVL North America, and our partners at Eviation Aircraft and Northrop Grumman.
So maybe quickly to start things out at the Q&A session, maybe with Mark, supply chain, you showed all the 2 billion plus orders you guys have. These planes going to come out starting in 3 or 4 years, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. You still going to see supply chain challenges? I mean, we certainly see right now in the US, for example, alone, battery factories left and right announced constantly, and I think very few maybe are talking about where's the raw material coming from. So I foresee supply challenges, just batteries alone. But do you see it, generally speaking, for you as well, or are you guys already addressing this today?
Yeah, it's a big concern, and we are addressing it. Things are getting a lot better right now. And as supply chain, I spent the bulk of my career not in supply chain. I spent it in engineering and operations. And I have a real focus on the design of the product. And I've lived with these poor designs that lead to suboptimal supply chains. And really my goal with that is to partner with companies like AVL and not just tell them this is what we want, deliver this, but say, what do you have? How can you help us? You know, you're the experts in this area, so you help us. Mm-hmm. And kind of break that traditional model of just telling suppliers, this is what we want, you have to deliver it. And I think you know the market better, you know the supply chain yourself, and leveraging what you know is how I think we ease that problem.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe Rick, question for you. Maybe we have some people in here that say, okay, going to the moon, great, so what? But I think you and I have talked about this in the past. Every time we've gone to the moon, or the NASA has gone to the moon, there's new technologies developed that are not just then going to be used for space exploration, but also they make it back into making maybe products safer on Earth, right? We're talking maybe the battery that we're going to have in the vehicle of Northrop Grumman, coming back and suddenly having a battery much more capable and safe maybe, right? So can you elaborate a little bit on that, on the benefits of?
Sure. I mean, NASA puts out a spin-off book every year, and in that book, it talks about various technologies that NASA develops, and some of the ones that are obviously, all our computers are derived because the Apollo folks needed a smaller computer to go to the moon with. There's a lot of the materials that were developed for space flight now support firefighters and things like that. So what can we get out of the moon? Let's just talk about better battery technology and energy storage. If you're on the surface of the moon at the South Pole, you have to have very efficient energy storage, energy collection. So obviously, as we develop those technologies, we advance what you guys have already been doing, and we advance it to a point where it can survive and support a lunar rover at the South Pole of the moon. We could take now those new technologies and feed them back into the automotive industry, feed them back into Mark's airplane, so he can now support that 500 nautical mile trip, for example. So that's just one example, but there's so many other examples of technologies. So these technologies that we develop to go to space don't just benefit the astronauts in space; they benefit everybody on the planet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, we want to open it up a little bit, maybe for any of you that may have a question. We have a microphone that we can run around. So if you have a question, if you want to stand up, maybe, or raise your hand. I have a hard time seeing somebody down here, maybe.
Right here. When will the Eviation plane be commercialized, and what kind of price range are you talking about? Will there be several models?
Yeah, so the entry into service is 2027, and we are going to build 3 models. There's going to be the commuter variant, there's going to be the cargo variant, and then the third variant that will be coming at a later date is the executive variant. We haven't disclosed a price point yet. You can kind of maybe do some math if you look at our order book and add it up. But the 2027 entry into service means we start a flight test in around 2025. And we have 3 airplanes that we're going to build that are not built yet that are going to go into be the ones we use for the flight test.
All right, thank you. Looking at the car side of things, how do cars are not iPhones, they're the most expensive thing most people will buy. How do you balance the advancement in car technology without creating market conditions where consumers have to upgrade every 2 to 5 years like they do with phones?
That's a great question. It's certainly a challenge. I mean, I always have the discussion, right? You have the house is usually your most expensive item that you have. The second one, unless you have yachts and all sorts of things, or a second house, is your vehicle. Yet if you look at it, especially now when we work from home oftentimes, a house is used 90% of the time. A vehicle, if you look at your vehicle, is used between 5, maybe 10% of the time. The rest, it stands. How is that justifiable? And how, with more and more technology getting into the vehicle, can it not suddenly become an item that just becomes too expensive? And I think if you go back 5 years ago when the shared mobility came up, that was one thing that they talked about, is that it's much more sustainable and efficient use of capital assets and of money as well. I think what comes in is really technology leadership on how technologies that today or tomorrow go into space will certainly be way more expensive than using that, what we've learned from there, and the ways we then adapted and put into the vehicles and make it less expensive, right? Computers the same way. I had an economics professor that would always tell me, I don't know why the automotive space cannot follow the computer industry and get cars cheaper and cheaper and at the same time better and better. And I always thought, yeah, that makes sense. And then 25 years ago when I got into the space, after about 4 years, I realized it's not the same thing. And computer more or less stays what it does, remains the features, right? They get better, they get faster. But if you look at a vehicle 25 years ago, you didn't have infotainment systems, you didn't have telematics, you didn't have ADAS, you didn't have some of the additional safety features and all that. And with that, we're constantly adding more things to the vehicle. And until that is done, which I don't know it ever will, the cost maybe either stays stable or goes up. With electric vehicle, clearly the major cost is your battery. And that's what everybody's working on, right? From a raw material, it's a supply chain issue in many cases. But it's definitely an industry challenge. But I believe a mindset of technology leadership and pushing new ways of doing things that certainly about 5 years ago, many of the startups have shown all global OEMs that it's doable, can help with that and alleviate that.
You guys are all working on very advanced systems, and really like seeing this, especially since I worked on the Atlas Centaur rockets. So, quick question for you. Are you looking at alternative power sources as well? Because, I mean, you mentioned the issues about batteries. What about hydrogen or something else?
I could start with that. We are doing trades. Obviously, NASA is looking for nuclear power for the surface of the moon, for example. That's probably further away than, the LTV. NASA would like to see a rover on the moon. I think they're looking for 2027, 2028, something like that. So right now we're thinking solar power is the easiest option right now to get it there. It's high TRL technology. It's advanced technology. We're looking at other things. One of the things that Northrop Grumman, other division of Northrop Grumman, is working on is beaming electrical power from low Earth orbit to the planet Earth. We're looking to see if we can utilize that technology because, again, the south pole of the moon is like a nightmare in terms of the sun just stays on the horizon and it's full of mountains, so the shadows are long, and you just can't collect power when you're in the shadow of a mountain. So if you could beam that power from up above. So these are some of the technologies that we're looking at. But it really comes down to, a lot of it comes down to energy storage and energy management. And that's where, a lot of us up here are working on those things.
Mark, maybe?
Take a crack at it for aviation. So there are several different competing technologies out there. There's all electric, which is Alice. There's hydrogen, and then there's combinations, which are hybrids, doing both electric and gas power to some sort. I think they're all going to mature over time. We've chosen to do the all-electric Alice because we think that's the fastest way to market and to keep it as just a plane. Our goal is just to get my personal goal is to have the first vehicle out there that someone can buy a ticket and go have a voyage on an all-electric vehicle.
As backup generators instead of diesel power or gasoline powered have really come online. I think the challenge is, and I'm sure you guys are aware of it, it's again supply chain. It's the infrastructure to some degree, or supply chain to some degree. It's the infrastructure, right? Just like we have with electric vehicles, enough chargers. What's the charging time? not only for vehicles, but also for planes, obviously. The infrastructure with hydrogen is even a bigger challenge. For the U.S. at least, I believe the Inflation Reduction Act will significantly help with that. But I don't think right now it will push it past heavy-duty trucks into passenger vehicles. I think passenger vehicles for the foreseeable future will be electric, also maybe with going back and also look at hybrid solutions again, just because of the charging infrastructure and the range anxiety and some of the other things. But hydrogen is definitely a technology that's looked at. But as Rick mentioned, and also Mark, hydrogen has its applications, but it's not across the board maybe.
So just out of curiosity, how does the situation on the moon with, the gravity being less of a factor impact the energy storage and the batteries? Does it have any impact? And if so, how does that kind of translate to, bringing that back to Earth?
We use a lot of batteries in all our spacecraft in zero-G environments. And as far as I know, the G level doesn't affect the batteries. I know thermal and other things do. So I think it's the thermal that's more the concern on the surface of the moon. Batteries like to have, you guys know, a very nice, comfortable temperature range.
Yeah, it's really the thermal management. When you certainly as well. Again, any vehicle. But if you go out, what are we mainly focused on with some of our tools from a simulation side, for example, that I mentioned, or technologies in general, that really a heavy focus today is given to thermal management, right? The concern of a thermal runaway, so of a battery fire that cannot be contained, or just the pure management of batteries. I mean, sometimes when I maybe watch too many things or too many things are going off my smartphone, you feel the battery getting warm. Well, now think about doing that in a vehicle, right? You have the music blaring, your seat warmers are on, you start and stop very quickly. Different type of operating conditions. The biggest challenge that the industry has right now is thermal management, and that certainly is not made easier in space.
Yeah, and I guess I should add that, we were talking batteries here, but 1.6G is has a lot of impact on the suspension and controllability of the vehicle. When you see those Apollo astronauts driving on the moon, it looks like they're going 100 miles an hour, bouncing up and down. And when they're going like 5 kilometers per hour, they're going almost at walking speed. So at 1.6G, obviously the suspension system, the traction of the wheels, and things like that, this is where AVL is really going to help us and earn their keep on the team.
Yeah. And simulation will be even more important has been in our programs with Eviation, and will be even more important with space than what it already is for ground vehicles that we use today.
Thank you, very interesting. Back to space and the moon, can you elaborate more on the precious metals, the exotic metals, the mining capabilities that we might obtain on the moon? I thought that, to me, is one of the potential huge benefits.
Yeah, I'm not a geologist, but I know that as we develop these infrastructure on the surface of the moon, as we have power stations on the moon or extra power available, we will start doing ISRU, in situ resource utilization. In other words, taking advantage of the materials on the surface of the moon. The most important thing right now that NASA has their eye on the surface of the moon is ice, water. Why? Water is, you break down to hydrogen and oxygen. You can use hydrogen and oxygen for so many different things: rocket fuel, breathing, growing plants, water, et cetera, et cetera. So water is really the most precious material you could find on the moon. But from what I understand, there's all kinds of other materials up there that I know that there's companies out there, lunar mining companies are popping up. But as we develop, as we put a rover on the moon, as power stations show up on the moon, as we get access to the moon through landers and other vehicles, then those other companies can come in and start taking advantage of that infrastructure of those vehicles and start mining for precious metals. I hope we get to that point very soon.
Thanks for listening to Reimagine Mobility Podcast. If you like this episode, please subscribe and tell a friend.